Picture this. The wind flows with the power of ancient forces. Ice crystals drift through the air like whispers of forgotten winters, and somewhere in a cave carved from necessity and hope, a small group of humans huddles around humanity's most precious possession, fire. It's 25,000 years ago, deep in the heart of the Ice Age, and these flames represent more than warmth or light. They are the thin thread connecting us to survival, to hope, to the very essence of what makes us human. Tonight, we journey back to that frozen world where keeping fire alive wasn't just a skill, it was the difference between civilization and oblivion. You can almost feel it now, can't you? That primal understanding that somewhere in your deepest genetic memory lies the knowledge of what it meant when the last ember glowed against endless darkness. Let yourself sink into this ancient story, this meditation on humanity's most fundamental relationship with the elements. As we explore together how our ancestors maintained the sacred flame, allow their wisdom to kindle something eternal within you, a connection to the unbroken chain of human ingenuity that burns as brightly today as it did in those caves 25,000 years ago. You are standing at the mouth of a limestone cave, and the wind carries a story older than memory itself. Feel the rough stone beneath your fingertips, worn smooth by countless hands that have sought the same shelter you seek now. The air tastes of ice and possibility sharp against your tongue, while somewhere behind you, deeper in the protective embrace of the earth, a small fire whispers its eternal promise. This is more than survival you're witnessing. This is humanity's first sacred covenant, written not in words, but in the patient tending of flame against impossible odds. During the last great cold, when ice sheets stretched across continents like frozen oceans, and the very air seemed determined to extinguish all warmth, fire became our species' most profound act of faith. Not faith in gods we couldn't see, but faith in our own ability to preserve something precious against the relentless appetite of winter. Ancient traces from places like Dolny Vestones reveal that Ice Age communities didn't merely use fire, they revered it with an intensity that borders on the mystical. Imagine kneeling beside hearths that were never allowed to die, where the arrangement of stones followed patterns passed down through generations like sacred geometry. Each placement deliberate, each configuration tested by the unforgiving mathematics of survival. The hearth wasn't simply the center of the dwelling, it was the axis around which human existence revolved. Picture yourself in that ancient circle, feeling the way firelight transforms faces into something more than human masks of gold and shadow that speak of wisdom earned through countless nights of vigilance. These flames weren't just consuming wood and bone, they were consuming the darkness that lived in human hearts when hope seemed nearly impossible. Feel the weight of understanding that settles over you like a warm cloak. Every spark that danced upward carried the promise of another dawn. Every ember held within its glowing heart the memories of countless generations who had kept this same flame alive through winters that would have broken lesser spirits. This was humanity's meditation on permanence in a world of constant change, a daily act of creation that transformed mere combustion into something approaching the divine. As you breathe in the ancient smoke, you begin to understand that fire was our mediator between the world of the living and that vast cold realm of ending that waited just beyond the cave mouth. Each night, as darkness pressed against the barriers of light, the firekeepers weren't just maintaining combustion, they were maintaining hope itself, keeping alive the fundamental human belief that intelligence and persistence could triumph over chaos. Close your eyes and feel the bitter kiss of air so cold it seems to have weight pressing against your skin, like a living thing seeking entry to your warmth. This is the world where fire becomes not just helpful, but miraculous, where the simple act of combustion transforms into humanity's most sophisticated technology. When temperatures plummet to depths that challenge life itself, fire reveals its true personality. No longer the obedient servant of modern convenience, it becomes temperamental, almost alive in its demands and desires. You can sense this ancient dance at work, the way thin air affects burn rates, making flames lazy and reluctant. The constant threat of moisture from breath from melting snow, from the very condensation of hope, meeting cold reality that could extinguish the most carefully tended flame in moments. Our ancestors learned to read fire's moods like those of a beloved but unpredictable companion. They understood that combustion in Ice Age conditions required constant partnership, a dance of give and take that demanded both careful precision and intuitive wisdom. Allow yourself to learn alongside them the way you must feed flames gradually, never overwhelming them with too much fuel, never starving them with too little. The delicate balance between protection from wind and provision of the life-giving air that fire craves like breath itself. The process we now understand as rapid combination of fuel with oxygen was to them a mysterious transformation that bordered on magic solid matter, becoming light heat and that invisible force that kept glowing eyes at the edge of darkness rather than approaching the warm circle of safety. They witnessed daily miracles, wood becoming warmth bone, becoming light fat, becoming the steady glow that could outlast the longest night. Breathe deeply and taste the ancient understanding that filled those caves. Fire wasn't just a tool, but a living entity that required respect, attention, and wisdom. The old ones who understood fire's nature without knowing its name developed techniques that seem remarkable even by modern standards. They learned to read the color of flames like we read facial expressions, understanding that blue meant efficient burn, yellow indicated fuel type, and orange warned of moisture or insufficient air. You can almost feel their hands guiding yours as you learn to position fuel not randomly, but according to principles that honored both fire's needs and natural laws. The way the hardwood coals provided steady, lasting heat, while softwood kindling offered quick ignition. How bone, properly prepared and dried, could burn hotter and longer than the finest timber. The careful architecture of the fuel pile, built not just for efficiency, but for the aesthetic pleasure of watching controlled transformation dance in patterns that soothed the human spirit through long nights of storm and worry. Let yourself drift backward through time, following the golden thread of flame that connects you to every human who has ever coaxed life from dying embers. Feel the profound weight of continuity as you realize that firekeeping was humanity's first unbroken tradition, passed down through bloodlines like the most sacred of inheritances. Each generation didn't just learn techniques, they inherited the profound responsibility of maintaining an unbroken chain, stretching back to the first human who captured lightning's gift or claimed fire from the heart of a volcano. Imagine yourself As part of this endless procession, the child watching wide-eyed as grandmothers demonstrated the subtle art of ember, breathing, the adolescent receiving the solemn charge to carry forward knowledge that meant the difference between human civilization and extinction. The ancient whispers from hearth sediments tell stories that span thousands of years, the same firesides occupied continuously generation after generation, adding their own chapter to humanity's longest-running story. These weren't casual camping spots. They were temples of continuity, where the flame itself became immortal, sustained by mortal hands, but transcending any single lifetime. Feel the sacred weight of this responsibility settling on your shoulders like a cloak woven from starlight and determination. The child learning to tend embers wasn't just mastering a skill, they were becoming a custodian of humanity's most essential secret. The knowledge lived not just in techniques, but in the very bones and blood of those who carried it forward, genetic memories that whispered guidance when conscious thought failed. Picture the moment when aging hands passed the ember-tending tools to young ones still uncertain in their movements, the careful transfer not just of implements, but of identity itself. To be a firekeeper was to be chosen by history to become part of something larger than individual existence. The flames that danced before their eyes weren't just consuming fuel, they were consuming the darkness of forgetting, ensuring that human knowledge would survive the longest winters. You can sense the profound psychology of this inheritance, how it created bonds between generations that transcended ordinary family relationships. The firekeeper's lineage wasn't just about blood, but about competence, wisdom, and the unshakable commitment to preserve life itself. Some bloodlines became known for their fire mastery, their children sought after for their inherited understanding of flame's mysteries. As you breathe in this ancient continuity, you realize that every modern human carries traces of these firekeepers in their cellular memory. That inexplicable comfort you feel watching flames dance, that instinctive knowledge of how to arrange kindling, that deep satisfaction in maintaining fire. These aren't learned behaviors, but genetic gifts from ancestors who made fire keeping their sacred calling. Settle into the profound mental landscape of those who lived always between sleep and wakefulness, always balanced on the delicate edge between security and catastrophe. Feel yourself inhabiting a state of consciousness that modern humans can barely comprehend, perpetual vigilance mixed with deep trust in ancient wisdom. Anxiety wedded to profound calm. In the world of Ice Age, storm sleep became not a private refuge, but a communal responsibility shared and distributed like precious fuel. Someone was always awake, always watching, always ready to coax dying embers back to robust life. Imagine the psychology required alert enough to detect the subtle changes in fire's behavior, calm enough to avoid the panic that could lead to fatal mistakes. The firekeeper's mind had to balance seeming contradictions with the skill of a master philosopher. Constant awareness about the flame's welfare, coupled with the profound calm that comes from trusting techniques refined over countless generations. Vigilance so intense, it became a form of meditation, attention so focused, it transformed ordinary consciousness into something approaching the transcendent. Feel the way this responsibility shaped entire personalities, individuals who found peace in sleeplessness, who discovered that watching fire became its own form of rest. The gentle rhythm of flame observation, the subtle dance of feeding fuel, the quiet satisfaction of seeing embers bloom into renewed life, these became sources of deep psychological nourishment, rather than burdens to be endured. You can sense how this created a unique form of community consciousness, where individual survival merged completely with collective responsibility. The firekeeper couldn't think only of their own comfort or convenience. Every decision rippled through the entire group's welfare. This wasn't duty imposed from outside, but identity formed from within people who couldn't imagine existing apart from their role as guardians of humanity's most crucial technology. The mental discipline required borders on the extraordinary by modern standards, maintaining alertness through multi-day storms, reading fire's subtle moods when exhaustion clouded judgment, making critical decisions when a moment's error could endanger everyone they loved. Yet somehow they found ways to make this burden into a form of meditation, this responsibility into a source of profound meaning. As you sink deeper into understanding their mindset, you realize that perpetual vigilance became its own reward. The firekeepers discovered something that modern psychology has forgotten, that caring deeply for something beyond yourself transforms anxiety into purpose, transforms watchfulness into a form of active love that sustains both the watcher and the watched. Let yourself contemplate the profound philosophical statement that every maintained fire represented, in a world that seemed designed to extinguish all warmth, all life, all hope. Feel a cosmic significance of flame dancing against darkness, humanity's first successful argument with an indifferent universe. When storms raged for days and cold pressed against cave walls like a living entity seeking entry, fire became more than survival tool. It became proof that consciousness could triumph over chaos. The flames consuming fuel weren't just creating heat. They were consuming despair, transforming it into light that pushed back both physical darkness and the existential darkness of a world without apparent mercy. Picture yourself witnessing humanity's first philosophical breakthrough. The understanding that intelligence applied with persistence could impose order on chaos, could create pockets of warmth and light in a cosmos that seemed fundamentally hostile to life. This wasn't casual survival, but humanity's declaration of independence from circumstance, our species' first successful campaign against entropy itself. Feel the profound metaphysical weight of maintaining fire against impossible odds. Each successful night represented victory over forces so vast and impersonal that they might as well have been divine. The presence of endless winter, the power of extinguishing wind, the whisper of despair that called from the darkness beyond the protective circle of light. Yet humans refused to surrender, refused to accept that consciousness was powerless against cosmic indifference. The firekeepers were conducting humanity's first experiments in applied metaphysics, proving through daily practice that will, combined with wisdom, could transform hostile reality into livable space. They were creating the fundamental human conviction that problems can be solved, that suffering can be alleviated, that intelligence matters in a universe that often seems to reward only blind force. You can sense the profound spiritual dimension of fire maintenance, how it became humanity's first form of prayer, not words directed toward distant deities, but actions that demonstrated faith in human potential. Every ember coaxed back to life was an act of defiance against despair. Every successful night a proof that consciousness could make a difference in the cosmic order. As you breathe in this ancient wisdom, you realize that every fire we kindle today continues this same fundamental human project. Whether lighting candles against modern darkness or engineering fusion reactors to power cities, we're still conducting the same experiment. Our ancestors began in Ice Age caves, using intelligence and determination to create islands of warmth and light in an often cold and indifferent cosmos. Allow yourself to enter the sacred geometry of survival, where every stone placement and stick arrangement followed patterns developed through countless trials, countless failures, countless moments when the wrong choice meant the difference between warmth and cold beyond bearing. Feel the profound intentionality behind what might appear to be simple fire-building understanding that these weren't random techniques, but humanity's first engineering elevated to the level of ceremony, because the stakes were absolute. The circular hearth wasn't merely efficient design. It represented completeness, protection, the human community gathered around its most vital center. Imagine yourself participating in the careful ritual of hearth construction, selecting stones not just for their heat retention, but for their symbolic weight, their ability to create a perfect circle that enclosed safety and excluded chaos. Each element of fire architecture served both practical and psychological purposes, creating spaces that functioned as efficiently as modern technology, while nourishing the human spirit through their beauty and meaning. Feel the meditative quality of arranging stones in patterns that honored both natural laws and aesthetics, creating structures that were simultaneously tools and temples. The positioning of fuel followed its own sacred logic, kindling arranged to allow optimal airflow, larger fuel positioned to create steady burn patterns, emergency reserves cached in locations that balanced accessibility with protection from moisture. This wasn't casual organization, but systematic engineering based on deep understanding of combustion principles and human psychology. Picture yourself learning the ritual movements that accompanied fire maintenance, the specific gestures for feeding flames that minimized heat loss and spark scattering, the careful choreography of ember management that prevented accidents while maximizing efficiency. These movements became so refined through practice that they approached the level of dance, turning survival necessity into something approaching art. You can sense the profound psychology behind ritualizing fire maintenance, how ceremony transformed anxiety into purpose, chaos into order, survival into something approaching the sacred. The formal patterns provided mental anchors during stress-reliable sequences that could be performed even when fear or exhaustion clouded judgment. The architecture of flame wasn't just about fire, but about community seating arrangements that ensured everyone received optimal heat, while maintaining social harmony, working spaces that allowed essential tasks to continue even during the worst storms, sleeping areas positioned to maximize shared warmth while preserving individual dignity. As you settle into understanding this ancient engineering, you realize that the ritual architecture of flame maintenance created more than physical comfort. It created the psychological architecture of human civilization itself, establishing patterns of intentional design and ceremonial meaning that continue to shape how we organize space and community today. Feel the numbing bite of cold against your fingertips as you attempt humanity's most crucial skill when your hands can barely maintain dexterity, and every exhaled breath threatens to douse the sparks you are desperately trying to nurture. This is fire, starting at the edge of impossibility, where technique becomes art, and art becomes the difference between life and continuing existence. In temperatures that turn exposed skin painful within minutes, creating fire requires precision that rivals the most delicate crafts. Imagine yourself kneeling beside a carefully prepared workspace, feeling how the ancient fire masters arranged their tools with careful attention to detail. Flint selected not just for spark quality, but for how it felt in frozen hands. Iron pyrite positioned for optimal striking angles, and most crucially, tinder prepared during better weather and guarded like treasure. The bow drill method transforms from individual skill to community ritual when survival hangs in the balance. Feel yourself as part of this ancient choreography, one person maintaining the steady, rhythmic rotation that builds heat through friction, their movements hypnotic and precise. Another preparing the tinder nest, with hands that shake from cold but remain steady through trained discipline. A third shielding the emerging ember from wind that seems determined to extinguish hope itself. You can sense the profound natural forces at work in this most primitive yet sophisticated technology. The careful selection of wood species that would generate heat most efficiently, understanding that some combinations worked like magic, while others failed completely. The basswood spindle turning against cedar hearthboard, creating friction that built heat degree by precious degree until the moment of miracle, when heat became ember. Ember became flame became humanity's victory over impossible odds. Picture the critical moment when the first wisp of smoke appears, when the dark dust in the notch begins to glow with the promise of fire. Feel the collective held breath of the community, understanding that everything depends on the next 60 heartbeats. The gentle breathing that feeds oxygen to the growing ember without overwhelming it. The careful transfer to prepared tinder that must catch immediately or force the process to begin again. The psychology required borders on the extraordinary maintaining steady hand coordination when every instinct screams for urgency, thinking clearly, when the margin for error approaches zero, trusting in techniques, when every impulse demands desperate improvisation. Yet somehow, through practice that began in childhood and continued through entire lifetimes, these ancient fire masters made the impossible routine. As you sink deeper into their world, you realize that fire starting in Ice Age conditions required not just technical skill, but a form of moving meditation that integrated body, mind, and spirit into perfect harmony with the fundamental forces of combustion and creation. Enter the sophisticated world of tinder preparation, humanity's first manufacturing process that transformed simple plant materials into technology capable of capturing and nurturing the tiniest spark into life-sustaining flame. Feel yourself in the role of ancient materials engineer, understanding that in a world where dry combustibles could mean the difference between survival and surrender, tinder preparation became both science and art. The collection process began during the brief warmth of summer, when experienced gatherers moved through landscapes with eyes trained to recognize materials that would serve them months later, when their lives depended on instant ignition. Picture yourself learning to identify the perfect birch bark strips, not too thick to catch quickly, not too thin to burn meaningfully, with just the right balance of oils and fiber structure to accept spark and transform it into flame. Imagine the careful harvesting of dried grasses selected not randomly, but according to principles learned through generations of trial and discovery. The grass stems had to be perfectly dry, but not brittle-aged to optimal readiness, but not so old they crumbled to useless dust. Each handful represented hours of careful searching, testing, and evaluation. The preparation of chaga fungus reveals the sophistication of Ice Age technology. This growth on birch trees became one of humanity's most reliable tinder sources once properly processed. Feel yourself learning to identify the perfect specimens, then preparing them through techniques that bordered on transformation, careful drying that preserved optimal texture, gentle pounding that created the right consistency for spark-catching storage methods that maintained readiness through months of waiting. You can sense the profound understanding of material properties that guided tinder bundle construction, the careful layering that maximized airflow while providing graduated fuel sources, the specific techniques for arranging different materials to create efficient combustion progression, birch bark for instant ignition, fine grass for initial flame development, slightly coarser materials for flame establishment, all arranged with architectural precision. The tinder bundle wasn't random assembly, but sophisticated engineering that anticipated the complete fire-starting process, how spark would travel through the materials where oxygen needed access, how flame would develop and spread, what materials would sustain combustion long enough for kindling to catch. This represented humanity's first systematic approach to combustion engineering. Picture the precious containers that protected prepared tinder animal bladders transformed into waterproof storage, carefully sealed and monitored for moisture infiltration. These containers were treasured possessions often decorated with symbolic elements that reflected their life-preserving importance. Inside, different tinder types were organized according to specific purposes: quick lighting materials for emergency situations, long burning preparations for challenging conditions, specialized combinations developed for particular weather patterns. As you contemplate this ancient technology, you realize that tinder preparation represented humanity's first triumph over seasonal limitations. The ability to preserve summer's fire-starting potential through winter's hostility, creating bridges between abundance and scarcity that made long-term survival possible. Slip into the mindset of ancient engineers who solved the problem of continuous fire through innovations that modern humans have largely forgotten, creating systems that could maintain combustion through conditions that would challenge contemporary technology. Feel yourself learning techniques that transformed fire from temporary tool into permanent companion, reliable as sunrise and enduring as human determination. The banking method reveals sophisticated understanding of combustion nature applied with Stone Age materials, carefully arranging coals and ash to create slow burning cores that could survive hours of apparent dormancy. Picture yourself mastering this delicate art, selecting the right coal sizes, understanding how ash insulation affected burning rates, knowing exactly how much oxygen to provide for sustaining combustion without encouraging rapid consumption. Imagine the specialized hearth designs that created air circulation systems more sophisticated than many modern installations, stone arrangements that channeled airflow with precision, creating gentle currents that fed oxygen to embers while protecting them from destructive winds. These weren't accidental configurations, but engineered solutions based on deep understanding of how air moves and heat transfers. The development of ember transport vessels represents a technological breakthrough that rivals modern innovations, clay containers designed specifically to maintain live coals during travel, creating portable fire that could survive journeys between camps or through dangerous terrain. Feel yourself understanding their thermal properties thick enough to insulate against heat loss, porous enough to allow necessary oxygen flow shaped to maximize coal longevity, while minimizing fuel consumption. These primitive thermal batteries could carry live fire for days, enabling human expansion into territories that would otherwise have remained uninhabitable. Picture the profound psychological impact of portable fire, the confidence it gave explorers, the security it provided travelers, the way it transformed unknown landscapes from threatening wilderness into potential homes. The positioning of hearths within caves followed principles that integrated architecture with natural air circulation patterns, understanding how cave mouth orientation affected wind flow, how ceiling height influenced smoke dispersal, how floor positioning optimized heat reflection from stone surfaces. This wasn't casual placement, but sophisticated engineering that maximized efficiency, while ensuring human comfort and safety. You can sense the profound understanding of heat dynamics that guided hearth placement positioning, that captured and redirected radiant heat arrangements, that created thermal zones for different activities, configurations that minimized fuel consumption while maximizing warmth distribution. The ancient fire masters understood principles that modern heating engineers study in advanced courses. Allow yourself to learn to read the subtle signs that indicated optimal burning conditions, the color of flames that indicated efficient combustion, the sound patterns that warned of problems before they became critical, the smoke characteristics that revealed fuel quality and burning efficiency. This knowledge transformed fire maintenance from guesswork into precise craft that could be practiced with scientific reliability. Enter the world of ancient resource managers who calculated survival with mathematical precision that would impress modern analysts, understanding that miscalculation in fuel consumption could lead entire communities to surrender to the cold. Feel yourself learning to think in terms of burn rates and resource allocation, where every piece of combustible material represented quantified time borrowed from winter's appetite. The classification of fuel types reveals sophisticated understanding of combustion nature. Hardwoods like oak that burn slowly but produce long-lasting coals, perfect for overnight maintenance, softwoods like pine that offered quick ignition and bright flames, ideal for tasks requiring immediate light or heat. Each species had its place in the carefully managed fuel economy selected and deployed according to specific tactical requirements. Picture yourself mastering the complex calculations that governed fuel selection, understanding that bone, when properly dried and cracked to expose marrow, burned hotter and longer than the finest wood. Learning that animal fat could extend burning time dramatically while creating waterproof barriers when applied to other fuel sources. Recognizing that certain bark types provided both quick ignition and sustained burn characteristics that made them invaluable for emergency situations. The development of fuel storage systems demonstrates engineering sophistication that rivals modern logistics underground caches, that protected combustibles from moisture-elevated platforms, that prevented ground dampness from ruining carefully gathered materials-covered areas, that balanced protection from weather with necessary air circulation to prevent decay. Imagine the psychological pressure of fuel management during extended storms, calculating consumption rates against available supplies, making decisions about when to conserve and when to expend precious reserves, understanding that generosity could lead to community survival, while hoarding might endanger everyone, including the hoarder. Feel yourself learning to read the subtle indicators that revealed fuel quality. The sound, different materials made when burned, indicating moisture content and burning efficiency. The way certain wood split when dried, revealing internal structure that predicted burning characteristics. The color changes that indicated optimal seasoning and readiness for use. The community protocols around fuel gathering and allocation created humanity's first complex resource management systems. Understanding who had responsibility for different types of collection, how much each person contributed to communal reserves, what happened when individuals couldn't meet their obligations to the group's survival. You can sense the profound mathematical thinking required calculating burn rates for different weather conditions, estimating fuel needs for varying storm durations, understanding the relationships between fire size, fuel consumption, and heat output that optimize survival while minimizing resource depletion. The emergency fuel protocols reveal sophisticated risk management materials, reserved only for the most desperate situations, understanding the trade-offs between immediate survival and long-term resource sustainability, knowing when conservation became more dangerous than consumption because inadequate fire could threaten life more certainly than fuel shortage. Allow yourself to discover the ancient knowledge that transformed ordinary materials into fire enhancement systems, where Ice Age innovators developed techniques that seem almost magical, even by modern standards. Feel yourself learning the subtle chemistry of combustion improvement through materials and methods that turn survival into sophisticated technology. The use of animal fat reveals deep understanding of combustion nature applied with Stone Age materials. Fat not only provided excellent fuel that burned with sustained heat and bright light, but created waterproof barriers when applied to wood that extended burning time dramatically. Picture yourself learning to render fat properly, understanding the temperature requirements that preserved its combustion properties while preventing spoilage. Imagine discovering how certain tree resins transformed fire behavior, pine pitch, that burned with intense heat while producing aromatic smoke that repelled insects, creating double benefits that improved both heating efficiency and living comfort. The collection and preparation of these natural combustion enhancers required sophisticated knowledge of plant nature and processing techniques. The discovery that bones could be processed for optimal burning reveals advanced understanding of material preparation and learning, that marrow-filled bones burned longer and hotter than solid bones. Understanding the techniques for cracking bones to expose marrow without destroying their structure, knowing how to position cracked bones for maximum heat output and minimum ash production. Feel yourself mastering the use of combustion air enhancement, understanding how positioning and arrangement of fuel could create airflow effects that increased burn efficiency, learning to construct fire arrangements that used wind as ally, rather than enemy developing techniques that turned adverse conditions into combustion advantages. The development of fire accelerants from natural materials demonstrates sophisticated knowledge understanding which plant materials contained oils or resins that could quicken ignition, learning to prepare and store these accelerants for optimal effectiveness, knowing how to deploy them safely without creating dangerous flare-ups or sudden blazes. Picture yourself learning the subtle art of smoke management through combustion enhancement, understanding how different materials affected smoke production and quality, learning to create fires that produced minimal smoke for concealment or maximum smoke for signaling, knowing how to burn materials that produced pleasant rather than irritating smoke for extended indoor use. The use of specific wood combinations reveals advanced understanding of combustion nature, learning which wood types burned well together and which combinations created problems, understanding how seasoning time affected different species differently, knowing how to blend fuel types for optimal heat output, burning duration, and smoke characteristics. You can sense the experimental methodology that developed these techniques, systematic testing of different materials and combinations, careful observation of results under various conditions, preservation through oral tradition that maintains successful innovations while eliminating dangerous failures. Step into the sophisticated organizational systems that enabled continuous fire maintenance through multi-day storms, where survival required coordination that foreshadowed the complex societies that would emerge thousands of years later. Feel yourself becoming part of a survival team where every role was crucial and individual failure could endanger the entire community. The watch schedule systems reveal advanced understanding of human psychology and natural rhythms, rotating responsibilities that prevented any individual from becoming dangerously exhausted, timing rotations to maintain optimal alertness levels, ensuring that the most experienced firekeepers supervised during the most dangerous overnight hours, when fires were most likely to fail. Picture yourself in the role of specialized fire maintainer, the wood gatherer, who understood not just where to find fuel, but how to evaluate quality in darkness, how to process materials efficiently under adverse conditions, how to cache supplies strategically for easy access during storms. This wasn't casual collection, but sophisticated logistics that anticipated needs hours or days in advance. Imagine the ember tender's responsibilities maintaining optimal coal bed conditions that could sustain fire through minimal fuel periods, understanding the subtle art of ash management that preserved heat while allowing necessary airflow, knowing exactly when and how to feed flames to maintain steady temperatures without wasting precious fuel. The fuel processor role required advanced technical knowledge, understanding how to prepare different materials for optimal burning, knowing the techniques for drying wet fuel, using existing fire heat, mastering the methods for creating specialized combustion materials from available resources during emergency conditions. Feel yourself as the wind watcher, responsible for monitoring weather conditions and their effects on fire behavior, understanding how changing wind patterns affected combustion, knowing when to adjust fire configuration to accommodate weather shifts, recognizing the early warning signs that indicated dangerous conditions requiring immediate protective action. The community coordination required for successful 24-hour fire maintenance created social bonds that transcended ordinary relationships. Understanding that everyone's survival depended on each person's competence and reliability. Developing communication systems that worked under adverse conditions, creating backup plans for situations when primary firekeepers became unable to perform their duties. You can sense the profound psychological dimension of shared fire responsibility, how the knowledge that others depended completely on your performance created motivation that transcended individual comfort or preference, the way collective survival created forms of accountability and mutual support that strengthened community bonds. The training systems for fire maintenance skills demonstrate sophisticated educational methodology, apprenticeship programs that gradually increased responsibility, while ensuring competence practice routines that prepared individuals for emergency conditions knowledge, transfer methods that preserved crucial techniques across generations while allowing for innovation and improvement. Picture the emergency protocols that governed crisis situations, understanding who took command when normal procedures failed, knowing the hierarchy of fuel allocation during shortages, having clear procedures for fire restart. When primary flames were lost, maintaining backup systems that could function even when primary firekeepers were injured or unable to continue. Feel the earth itself trembling as atmospheric forces beyond modern comprehension gather strength, preparing to test human ingenuity against the raw power of an Ice Age world where weather systems operated on scales that dwarf contemporary storms. You stand at the threshold of understanding weather not as inconvenience, but as existential challenge that demanded every ounce of human wisdom and courage. These weren't the predictable winter storms of our climatically stable modern world. They were chaotic atmospheric giants born from the collision between massive continental ice sheets and oceanic weather systems that created pressure differences capable of generating winds that howled across frozen landscapes at speeds exceeding the swiftest modern storms. Picture yourself feeling the pressure changes that preceded these weather events, sensing in your bones the approach of conditions that could challenge exposed humans within minutes. Ancient climate traces whisper stories of storms that persisted for weeks, not days, creating siege conditions that tested every aspect of human survival, technology, and social organization. Imagine yourself preparing for weather that wouldn't simply pass through, but would settle over your landscape like a frozen blanket of challenge, demanding not just endurance, but active resistance through every hour of its duration. The temperature drops associated with these storm systems challenged the very limits of human ability to maintain warmth, sustained periods of cold so intense that turned the air itself into something hostile to exposed flesh, creating conditions where inadequate shelter or failed fire meant surrender in hours rather than days. Feel yourself understanding that these weren't weather events to be waited out, but battles to be fought with every available resource and technique. You can sense the profound psychological impact of storms that seem to have personality intelligence that sought out every weakness in human defenses, winds that found gaps in shelter construction, cold that penetrated every barrier, moisture that threatened to extinguish the fires that stood between human communities and extinction. The weather became an active opponent, requiring strategic thinking and tactical response. The unpredictability of Ice Age weather systems meant that storm preparation couldn't rely on seasonal patterns or predictable timing. Communities had to maintain constant readiness for conditions that could develop with minimal warning and persist far longer than any reasonable preparation could anticipate. Picture yourself living in perpetual readiness for weather that could challenge your community's survival resources to their absolute limits. Understanding storm patterns became crucial survival knowledge that elevated weather observation from casual awareness to sophisticated science learning. To read cloud formations that indicated developing pressure systems, recognizing wind direction changes that preceded major weather shifts, interpreting animal behavior that provided early warning of approaching atmospheric violence. Allow yourself to develop the mental resilience required to function during storms that lasted longer than many modern people have ever experienced continuous adverse weather, maintaining rational decision-making when the constant noise of wind created sensory overload, preserving hope and community morale when each day brought the same unrelenting challenge from hostile elements. Allow your body to remember what it feels like when cold becomes not discomfort, but immediate physical threat. When human warmth systems shift into emergency mode and every calorie becomes precious fuel in the desperate attempt to maintain core temperature against an environment determined to steal every degree of warmth. Feel yourself understanding that at these temperatures, fire provided not luxury, but life support, as essential as oxygen or water. When air temperatures drop below levels that challenge life itself, human bodies become heat-losing systems operating in crisis mode, internal processes accelerating desperately as systems burn calories at unsustainable rates, attempting to maintain the narrow temperature range required for cellular function. Picture yourself experiencing this acceleration, feeling your body consuming its own resources in the attempt to generate enough internal heat to survive without external warmth sources. The natural laws of heat transfer become brutally apparent in extreme cold conduction, stealing warmth through any contact with cold surfaces, air movement, carrying away body heat through circulation, radiation, bleeding thermal energy into the infinite cold of space above. Understanding these principles wasn't academic exercise, but survival necessity that determined shelter design, clothing strategies, and fire positioning with life-preserving precision. Fire created microclimates that allowed human warmth systems to function normally, rather than in constant emergency mode zones of heat, where bodies could rest from the exhausting work of heat generation spaces, where fingers could maintain the dexterity required for essential tasks, areas where breathing didn't rob internal heat through the warming of frigid air. Feel yourself learning the sophisticated positioning techniques that maximized fire's warming efficiency, understanding how radiant heat, could be captured and reflected using stone surfaces, learning how to create thermal barriers that trapped warm air, while excluding cold drafts, mastering the arrangement of bodies and materials that shared and conserved heat with mathematical precision. The therapeutic dimension of fire warmth reveals deep understanding of human body function under extreme stress, recognizing that severe cold affected mental function before physical function, understanding how gradual rewarming prevented dangerous thermal shock, knowing the signs that indicated when individuals required immediate warming intervention to prevent permanent injury or worse consequences. You can sense the profound knowledge of human thermodynamics that guided fire management, understanding how different body positions optimized heat absorption, learning how clothing could be arranged to maximize warmth retention while allowing necessary movement, recognizing how nutritional status affected individual cold tolerance and heating requirements. The community heat management strategies demonstrate sophisticated understanding of collective thermal dynamics, arranging sleeping areas that maximized shared body heat, while maintaining fire warmth access, organizing work schedules that rotated individuals through warming stations, creating protocols that ensured everyone received adequate heat exposure during extended cold periods. Picture yourself mastering the delicate balance between fire size and fuel consumption, understanding that larger fires provided more heat but consumed fuel at unsustainable rates, learning how to maintain optimal warming temperatures with minimum resource expenditure, knowing how to adjust fire characteristics based on changing weather conditions and fuel availability. Enter the world of ancient engineers who solved problems that would challenge modern designers, creating fire systems capable of maintaining combustion in wind conditions that would extinguish contemporary campfires instantly. Feel yourself learning to work with wind rather than against it, transforming atmospheric energy into ally rather than enemy. The development of windscreen systems reveals sophisticated understanding of how air moves applied with Stone Age materials, carefully positioned stones that created pressure barriers without completely blocking airflow, understanding that fire needed oxygen but required protection from direct wind impact. Picture yourself learning to read wind patterns and air pressure positioning barriers that redirected rather than blocked airflow to create stable combustion zones. Imagine mastering the use of animal hides as dynamic wind protection, stretching skins on frames that could be adjusted based on changing wind conditions, understanding how to create flexible barriers that responded to wind pressure while maintaining protective effectiveness. These weren't crude shelters, but sophisticated engineering that balanced protection with the ventilation requirements necessary for sustained combustion. The modification of cave mouths demonstrates advanced understanding of architectural air dynamics, using stone arrangements and constructed barriers to create channeling effects that actually enhanced fire performance, turning cave openings into wind management systems that controlled airflow with precision that rivals modern climate control design. Feel yourself learning to create thermal chimneys that manage both smoke removal and combustion air supply, understanding how heated air created updrafts that could be harnessed for fire improvement, learning to construct chimney systems using available materials that created optimal draft conditions while preventing heat loss through excessive ventilation. The natural forces involved in wind-resistant fire design required understanding complex relationships between air pressure combustion requirements and heat management, learning how wind velocity affected flame behavior, understanding how air turbulence could be managed rather than eliminated, mastering techniques that used wind energy to enhance rather than destroy fire performance. You can sense the experimental methodology that developed these solutions, systematic testing of different windscreen configurations under various conditions, careful observation of how different materials and arrangements affected fire behavior preservation through oral tradition that maintained successful innovations while eliminating dangerous failures. The community coordination required for wind-resistant fire maintenance created specialized roles that anticipated modern engineering teams, individuals who specialized in reading wind conditions and adjusting protection systems, others who understood the structural engineering required for barrier construction teams that could rapidly reconfigure fire protection based on changing weather conditions. Picture yourself learning to use wind as combustion enhancer, rather than threat understanding how controlled airflow could increase fire efficiency, learning to create air circulation patterns that improved rather than threatened combustion, mastering techniques that turned atmospheric movement into thermal advantage. Immerse yourself in the ancient science of moisture management, where understanding water in all its forms, liquid, solid, vapor, meant the difference between maintaining life-giving fire and watching it surrender under the relentless presence of an element that could appear as snow ice humidity or the seemingly innocent condensation from human breath. The threat of snow infiltration required sophisticated architectural solutions, understanding how wind patterns carried snow into sheltered areas, learning to create barriers that prevented snow accumulation in critical fire zones, mastering techniques for rapid snow removal that didn't disturb carefully arranged fire systems or waste precious fuel. Picture yourself developing waterproofing technologies using available materials, learning how animal fats could be applied to wood to create moisture barriers that preserved combustibility, understanding how strategic covering of fuel supplies prevented water infiltration while allowing necessary air circulation, mastering storage techniques that maintained dry combustibles through extended periods of high humidity. The management of condensation within caves reveals advanced understanding of atmospheric moisture dynamics, recognizing how human breath-cooking activities and body heat created water vapor that could condense on cold surfaces and threaten fire systems, learning to create ventilation patterns that managed humidity without sacrificing heat retention. Imagine mastering the drainage engineering that protected hearth systems from water infiltration, understanding how to position fires to avoid groundwater seepage, learning to create water channeling systems that directed moisture away from crucial fire areas, developing techniques for managing surface water that accumulated during snowmelt periods. The development of fuel drying systems demonstrates sophisticated understanding of moisture management and heat recovery, learning how to use existing fire heat to dry wet fuel without consuming excessive resources, understanding the positioning and timing required for efficient fuel preparation and mastering techniques that could restore combustibility to materials that seemed hopelessly waterlogged. Feel yourself learning to read the subtle signs that indicated moisture threats, understanding how humidity changes affected combustion efficiency, recognizing the early indicators of condensation problems before they became critical learning, to anticipate moisture infiltration patterns based on weather conditions and shelter characteristics. The waterproofing of storage systems required advanced material science understanding which animal tissues provided the best moisture barriers, learning preparation techniques that maximized waterproofing effectiveness while maintaining material durability, developing storage methods that protected crucial fire-starting materials through months of adverse conditions. You can sense the profound understanding of water cycles that guided moisture management, recognizing how seasonal changes affected water vapor patterns, understanding how ground moisture varied with weather conditions, learning to anticipate and prepare for moisture challenges before they threatened fire systems. Feel yourself entering a world where the constant presence of wind transforms communication into engineering challenge, where the survival of entire communities depends on developing signaling systems that function when normal human speech becomes impossible. The acoustic environment of Ice Age storms created communication problems that demanded innovative solutions centered around fire maintenance and community coordination. When wind speeds reached levels that made verbal communication impossible beyond arm's length, communities developed visual signaling systems that use fire as both communication medium and survival tool. Specific flame patterns that conveyed information about fuel status smoke signals that indicated emergency conditions or successful completion of crucial tasks. Ember arrangements that provided status updates visible even through storm conditions. Picture yourself learning the visual language of flame communication, understanding how flame height indicated fuel quality and burning efficiency, learning to read flame color patterns that revealed combustion conditions and potential problems, mastering the subtle art of smoke interpretation that conveyed complex information about fire health and resource needs. The development of tactile communication systems reveals sophisticated understanding of human sensory capabilities under extreme conditions, learning to communicate through touch patterns that conveyed crucial information, understanding how to use physical positioning and movement to coordinate fire maintenance tasks, mastering nonverbal signals that functioned even when visibility was limited by smoke or darkness. Imagine the acoustic properties of different burning materials becoming communication tools, understanding how various fuel types created distinctive sound patterns when burning, learning to recognize the audio signatures that indicated optimal combustion conditions, mastering the ability to monitor fire health through sound even when other senses were compromised by storm conditions. The coordination of community fire maintenance required sophisticated signaling protocols, understanding who was responsible for different aspects of communication learning backup systems that functioned when primary communication methods failed, developing emergency signals that could alert the community to critical situations requiring immediate response. Feel yourself learning to use fire itself as acoustic engineering, understanding how fire positioning affected sound transmission within shelters, learning how flame arrangements could create acoustic barriers that reduced wind noise while maintaining necessary communication capability, mastering techniques that optimized both heating efficiency and communication effectiveness. The psychological dimension of storm communication reveals deep understanding of human behavior under extreme stress, recognizing how acoustic isolation affected community morale and decision-making learning communication techniques that maintained social bonds during extended periods of difficult conditions, developing signaling methods that provided reassurance and coordination even when normal interaction was impossible. You can sense the sophisticated understanding of human sensory adaptation that guided communication development, learning how prolonged exposure to storm conditions affected hearing and vision, understanding how to maintain communication effectiveness as sensory capabilities changed, mastering techniques that functioned reliably even when individuals were experiencing the disorientation common during extended storm exposure. Allow yourself to sink into the profound mental landscape of humans facing not just physical survival challenges, but psychological experiences conducted by weather systems that seemed designed to challenge human spirit before they challenged human bodies. Feel the weight of understanding that multi-day storms created mental health challenges that could prove as dangerous as hypothermia or hunger. The constant presence of wind created sensory experiences that challenged human psychological resilience, sustained sound levels that prevented normal sleep patterns, acoustic environment that made concentration difficult, and decision-making dangerous, auditory conditions that could trigger anxiety responses and panic reactions that endangered community safety and individual survival. Picture yourself learning to find peace within chaos, developing mental techniques that transform storm noise from source of stress into background meditation, understanding how focused attention on fire maintenance created psychological anchor points, learning how repetitive tasks associated with survival could become calming rituals rather than stressful burdens. The confined conditions of storm shelters tested human social psychology in ways that revealed both the best and most challenging aspects of human nature. Enclosed spaces that intensified personality conflicts while demanding unprecedented cooperation, physical proximity that challenged individual privacy, while requiring intimate dependence on others' competence and goodwill. Imagine the psychological pressure of constant vigilance, understanding that momentary inattention could endanger everyone, learning to maintain alertness through exhaustion and stress, developing mental resilience that could sustain focus through conditions that would challenge modern individuals within hours. The role of fire as psychological anchor reveals deep understanding of human mental health requirements, recognition that firelight provided visual focus that prevented anxiety and disorientation, understanding how flame observation created meditative states that reduced stress and promoted mental stability, learning how fire maintenance rituals provided psychological structure during periods when normal routines became impossible. Feel yourself learning to use survival activities as therapeutic tools, understanding how shared tasks created social bonding that sustained community morale, learning how competence in crucial skills provided self-confidence that countered despair, mastering techniques that transformed survival necessity into sources of meaning and purpose. The development of mental health protocols for extended storms demonstrates sophisticated understanding of human psychology recognizing the early signs of stress reactions that could endanger community safety learning intervention techniques that could prevent psychological breakdown before it became critical, developing support systems that maintained individual mental health while preserving group cohesion. You can sense the profound spiritual dimension of enduring endless winter, how communities developed philosophical frameworks that found meaning in suffering, learning to transform survival challenges into opportunities for personal growth and community bonding, creating belief systems that sustained hope even when physical evidence suggested despair was rational. Step into the transformative space where individual survival becomes impossible and shared warmth creates the first complex human societies, where the circle around the hearth serves as humanity's prototype parliament, and the glow of firelight reveals the birth of political cooperation. Feel yourself understanding that fire didn't just provide heat, it created the social conditions that made civilization possible. The spatial arrangement around fires wasn't casual seating, but sophisticated social engineering understanding. How proximity to heat became a form of social currency learning. How fire access created the first complex hierarchies based on competence rather than pure physical dominance, recognizing how shared warmth necessitated negotiations and agreements that foreshadowed formal governance systems. Picture yourself in these ancient councils where decisions were made collectively, because individual choices rippled through everyone's survival prospects. Understanding how fire placement affected the entire community's welfare learning. How fuel allocation required consensus that balanced individual needs with group survival. Recognizing how fire maintenance responsibilities created leadership roles based on expertise and reliability. The traces from sites like Malta reveal sophisticated social organization centered around hearth areas, distinct zones for different activities that maximized fire's benefits, while accommodating community needs, specialized areas for tool making that took advantage of optimal light conditions, sleeping arrangements that shared heat efficiently while maintaining social relationships and individual dignity. Imagine the complex social dynamics created by fire dependence, understanding how individual competence in fire-related skills translated into social status and community influence, learning how fire knowledge created forms of social insurance where expertise provided security during crises, recognizing how shared fire responsibilities created bonds that transcended kinship relationships. The development of fire-centered social roles reveals the emergence of specialized society individuals who gained recognition and authority through superior fire-making abilities, others who earned status through exceptional fuel-gathering skills, communities that began organizing themselves around fire-related competencies rather than simple physical strength or family connections. Feel yourself learning the social protocols that governed fire sharing, understanding the etiquette that managed access to optimal warming positions, learning the negotiation skills required for fuel allocation during shortages, mastering the diplomatic techniques that resolved conflicts without endangering the fire systems that everyone depended upon. The psychology of shared survival created forms of interdependence that were simultaneously liberating and constraining individuals, gained security through community membership, but accepted responsibilities and limitations that modified behavior according to group needs, creating the fundamental tension between individual autonomy and collective welfare that continues to shape human societies. You can sense the profound transformation in human consciousness that occurred around shared fires, the shift from individual survival thinking to community welfare consideration, the development of long-term planning that extended beyond immediate personal needs, the emergence of abstract concepts like fairness and responsibility that became necessary for group survival in challenging conditions. Enter humanity's first complex economy, where labor resources and expertise became tradable commodities in sophisticated networks of mutual obligation that operated with the precision of modern financial systems and the life or death stakes that made every transaction crucial for community survival. The social currency of fire-related skills created economic relationships that transcended simple barter. Individuals who excelled at finding dry wood during storms gained social capital that could be exchanged for food, preparation, tool creation, or other essential services, creating labor markets based on specialized competence rather than random resource availability. Picture yourself learning to navigate these ancient economic systems, understanding how superior fire-starting ability translated into negotiating power during resource allocation, learning how knowledge of optimal fuel types created consulting opportunities that generated social obligations and reciprocal benefits, recognizing how fire maintenance expertise became insurance against individual hardship during community crises. The development of fuel allocation protocols reveals sophisticated understanding of resource economics communities that created systems for determining who received premium burning materials during shortages, establishing contribution requirements that balanced individual capability with community needs, developing consequent systems for individuals who couldn't or wouldn't fulfill their obligations to group survival. Imagine the complex calculations required for survival economics, understanding how much each community member needed to contribute to maintain adequate fuel supplies, learning to balance current consumption against future resource availability, developing distribution systems that maintained community morale while ensuring essential fire maintenance received priority during shortages. The emergence of fire-related social contracts created humanity's first formal economic agreements, understanding the obligations that came with receiving community fire support, learning the responsibilities that accompanied access to shared fuel resources, recognizing how failure to meet economic obligations could result in social consequences that threatened individual survival. Feel yourself learning to evaluate different types of economic contribution, understanding how physical labor and fuel gathering compared to specialized knowledge in fire maintenance, learning how innovation in fire technology created value that could be traded for other essential resources, mastering the social skills required to negotiate fair exchanges when survival resources were at stake. The development of surplus management reveals advanced economic thinking communities that learn to accumulate fuel reserves during abundant periods, understanding how to invest current labor in future security, developing storage and preservation techniques that enabled economic planning beyond immediate survival needs. You can sense the profound psychological shift required to operate in these ancient economies, moving from individual resource hoarding to community resource sharing, developing trust systems that enabled complex exchanges even when immediate reciprocity wasn't possible, learning to think in terms of long-term economic relationships rather than simple transaction completion. Allow yourself to witness the birth of human education as children learn skills that will determine not just their own survival, but the continuation of human civilization itself, where fire mastery becomes the subject of humanity's first formal curricula, and the hearth transforms into classroom laboratory and sacred temple of knowledge transmission. The structured learning progression reveals sophisticated understanding of human development and skill acquisition. Young children, beginning with simple observation and mimicry, learning to recognize different wood types and their burning characteristics, gradually developing the visual pattern recognition that would enable them to evaluate fuel quality and fire health at a glance. Picture yourself in the role of child apprentice, feeling the profound responsibility of learning skills where mistakes could have serious consequences. Understanding that fire knowledge wasn't casual education but life-sustaining training. Learning through carefully supervised practice that gradually increased responsibility while maintaining safety margins, recognizing that mastery required not just technical competence, but emotional maturity to handle extreme pressure. The knowledge transfer methods reveal advanced pedagogical understanding, learning through storytelling that embedded technical information in memorable narratives, practicing skills through games and simulations that reduced stress, while building competence, receiving instruction through demonstration and guided practice that accommodated different learning styles and individual capability. Imagine the profound cultural significance of fire education, understanding that teaching fire skills was simultaneously practical training and spiritual initiation learning, that fire knowledge carried cultural values and social responsibilities, along with technical information, recognizing that fire mastery created not just skilled individuals, but community leaders and cultural stewards. The assessment methods for fire competence demonstrate sophisticated understanding of skill evaluation testing that measured not just technical ability, but judgment under pressure, evaluation systems that assessed both individual capability and community responsibility, recognition protocols that acknowledge mastery while continuing advanced education in specialized techniques. Feel yourself learning the emotional dimensions of fire education, understanding how fear of failure could paralyze learning, while overconfidence could create dangerous mistakes. Learning to balance respect for fire's power with confidence in human ability to master it. Developing the psychological resilience required to function effectively when other people's lives depended on your competence. The integration of fire education with other survival skills reveals holistic approaches to human development. Understanding how fire knowledge connected to hunting, cooking, tool making, and social organization learning. How fire mastery enabled and enhanced other crucial competencies, recognizing how fire education provided foundation for all other technological and social learning. You can sense the profound intergenerational bonding created through fire education relationships between teachers and students that transcended ordinary family connections. Understanding how knowledge transmission created social obligations that lasted lifetimes. learning how fire education established mentorship patterns that strengthened community bonds and ensured cultural continuity. Step into the emergence of humanity's first political systems, where mastery over fire created forms of authority that transcended physical strength and established leadership based on knowledge competence and the community's recognition that certain skills were too crucial for survival to be left to chance or democratic decision-making. The social power created by fire expertise reveals the birth of meritocratic leadership individuals who gained authority not through inheritance or force, but through demonstrated ability to solve problems that affected everyone's survival. Understanding how superior fire-making skills translated into broader social influence and community decision-making power. Picture yourself observing the complex dynamics of fire-based authority leaders who wielded power that came with enormous responsibility, understanding that their decisions could save or endanger entire communities, learning how expertise-based leadership created different social relationships than those based on physical dominance or family connections. The development of fire master roles reveals sophisticated understanding of specialized leadership individuals who became indispensable to community survival through their ability to restart fires after disasters, maintain combustion during impossible conditions, or innovate solutions to novel fire-related challenges, creating authority that was simultaneously practical and almost mystical. Imagine the political protocols that governed fire-related decision-making, understanding how communities balanced individual expertise with collective input, learning how fire masters gained authority to make unilateral decisions during emergencies while remaining accountable to community welfare during normal conditions, recognizing how fire-based leadership created new forms of social contract between leaders and followers. The traces suggest that fire masters often held special positions in community organization burial practices that indicated elevated social status tool allocation that reflected their crucial role in community survival living arrangements that acknowledged their importance while maintaining accessibility for their essential services. Feel yourself learning the diplomatic skills required for fire authority, understanding how to exercise power in ways that maintained community cooperation, learning how to make life-preserving decisions without creating resentment or resistance, mastering the communication techniques that explained technical decisions to community members who lacked the expertise to evaluate them independently. The emergence of fire-related political institutions reveals advanced social organization communities that developed formal recognition systems for fire expertise, establishing succession protocols that ensured continuity of fire leadership, creating training systems that developed backup leadership while maintaining quality standards. You can sense the profound psychological dimensions of fire authority leaders who carried the burden of knowing that their mistakes could endanger people they cared about, individuals who had to balance confidence in their abilities with awareness of the limitations of human knowledge communities that had to balance trust and expertise with awareness that even experts could fail. Enter the sophisticated world of inter-community relations, where fire becomes both the medium and the message of diplomatic exchange, where the protocols around flame sharing create humanity's first international relations, and establish patterns of alliance formation that continue to influence human societies thousands of years later. The decision to share fire with other groups required complex strategic calculation, understanding that generosity demonstrated strength and confidence, while withholding revealed weakness and fear. Learning how fire sharing created obligations for future reciprocity that could prove crucial during crises, recognizing how flame diplomacy established relationships that transcended immediate survival needs. Picture yourself participating in these ancient diplomatic ceremonies, understanding the social significance of offering fire to strangers, learning the protocols that governed intergroup flame sharing, without compromising your own community's survival resources, mastering the cultural literacy required to interpret other groups' fire-sharing behaviors and respond appropriately. The development of fire-sharing rituals reveals sophisticated understanding of symbolic communication ceremonies that conveyed complex information about group strength, resource abundance, technological competence, and social organization through carefully orchestrated flame presentations, creating diplomatic languages that functioned across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Imagine the strategic dimensions of fire diplomacy communities that used fire sharing to assess potential allies and identify possible threats. Learning to read other groups' fire technologies and techniques for intelligence about their survival capabilities, understanding how fire-related interactions could establish territorial agreements and resource-sharing protocols. The negotiation protocols around fire sharing created humanity's first formal diplomatic procedures, understanding the etiquette that governed intergroup fire interactions, learning the reciprocity expectations that maintained diplomatic relationships, developing conflict resolution methods that prevented fire-sharing disputes from escalating to violence that could endanger all parties. Feel yourself learning the cultural intelligence required for effective fire diplomacy, understanding how different groups approached fire technology and social organization, learning to recognize the subtle signals that indicated other communities' attitudes toward cooperation or competition, mastering the communication skills that built trust across cultural differences. The economic dimensions of intergroup fire sharing reveal advanced understanding of resource diplomacy communities that exchanged fire expertise for access to hunting territories, traded fire maintenance knowledge for specialized tool-making techniques, developed intergroup economic relationships that enhanced everyone's survival prospects while maintaining community independence. You can sense the profound impact of fire diplomacy on human social evolution, how intergroup flame sharing created the first networks of human cooperation that extended beyond kinship relationships, understanding how fire-based alliances enabled human expansion into new territories and survival in more challenging environments, recognizing how diplomatic fire sharing established patterns of peaceful cooperation that became alternatives to violence and competition. Allow yourself to enter the birth of human storytelling, where the necessity of transmitting crucial fire knowledge creates narrative traditions that transform survival information into cultural DNA, where myths and legends become the delivery systems for technical expertise that must be preserved across generations without the benefit of written language. The stories that developed around fire's origins served multiple sophisticated functions. Entertainment, that made long winter nights bearable, education that embedded crucial technical information in memorable narrative form, and cultural bonding that created shared identity through common stories that defined community values and individual responsibilities. Picture yourself listening to ancient tales that seem like mythology, but function as survival manuals, stories about fire's creation that actually describe fire-starting techniques, legends about fire spirits that encode information about combustion behavior, myths about fire heroes that demonstrate proper fire maintenance protocols while inspiring listeners to develop their own fire-related competencies. The development of cautionary fire tales reveals advanced understanding of risk communication stories about communities that perished when fires died that weren't just entertainment, but safety training narratives about individuals who failed in firekeeping responsibilities that served as both moral instruction and technical education legends that embedded information about dangerous fire practices in memorable emotional frameworks. Imagine the sophisticated encoding of technical information within mythological frameworks. Understanding how stories about fire spirits actually contained information about optimal fire management techniques. Learning how heroic narratives demonstrated proper responses to fire emergencies while inspiring courage and competence. Recognizing how mythological elements made crucial information memorable across generations. The oral tradition systems that preserved fire knowledge demonstrate advanced information management communities that developed storytelling protocols ensuring accurate transmission of crucial technical details, narrative techniques that embedded error-checking mechanisms within entertaining stories, cultural practices that maintained story integrity while allowing for innovation and improvement. Feel yourself understanding the profound psychological functions of fire mythology stories that transformed terrifying survival challenges into manageable human-scale narratives, tales that provided emotional frameworks for coping with the stress and responsibility of fire maintenance narratives that created meaning and purpose from the daily struggle to maintain flames against impossible odds. The integration of fire stories with broader cultural mythology reveals sophisticated understanding of cultural education, understanding how fire tales connected to hunting stories, social organization myths, and spiritual beliefs to create comprehensive worldviews that guided all aspects of human behavior, learning how fire mythology provided foundation for more complex cultural and philosophical development. You can sense the profound legacy of these ancient storytelling traditions, how myths developed around Ice Age hearths established patterns of knowledge transmission that continue today, understanding how the combination of entertainment and education that characterized fire stories became the template for all subsequent human cultural development. Recognizing how ancient fire mythology continues to influence modern human relationships with technology and community. Feel yourself standing at the crossroads of human evolution, where the demands of Ice Age fire mastery created selection pressures that fundamentally altered our species' development, shaping not just survival strategies, but the very architecture of modern human consciousness. You are witnessing the moment when fire dependence transformed Homo sapiens into something unprecedented in evolutionary history. The cognitive demands of maintaining fire through Ice Age conditions required mental capacities that went far beyond simple tool use, planning fuel collection across seasonal cycles, understanding complex combustion nature through observation and experimentation, coordinating group efforts with precision that demanded both leadership skills and collaborative intelligence that favored individuals who could think abstractly about future scenarios and cause and effect relationships. Picture yourself understanding how fire mastery selected for delayed gratification capabilities that distinguish humans from other species, individuals who could resist using fuel immediately in order to preserve resources for future emergencies, communities that could invest current labor in long-term fire security, rather than immediate comfort psychological traits that enabled planning and resource management across time scales that challenged human intuition. The social cooperation required for successful fire maintenance created evolutionary pressures that favored individuals with sophisticated communication skills, emotional intelligence, and the ability to subordinate immediate self-interest to group welfare, understanding that selfish behavior could endanger everyone learning to navigate complex social relationships that balanced individual needs with community survival, developing the empathy and social awareness that made complex cooperation possible. Imagine the profound neurological adaptations that developed around fire-related activities, brain structures that found deep satisfaction in flame observation and maintenance, neural pathways that created calming responses to firelight and warming sensations, cognitive systems that automatically recognized fire-related patterns and potential problems, mental frameworks that organized thinking around fire-centered survival strategies. The modern human comfort with circular social arrangements reflects evolutionary adaptations developed around Ice Age hearths. Our instinctive preference for gathering in circles for important discussions. Our psychological comfort with firelight during social interactions, our deep satisfaction from maintaining fires even when alternative heating sources are available, our tendency to organize important social activities around flame-centered ceremonies and celebrations. Feel yourself recognizing how contemporary human psychology carries traces of Ice Age fire dependence, our instinctive unease with darkness that reflects ancient understanding of fire's protective qualities, our comfort with controlled fire that demonstrates inherited knowledge of combustion management, our social bonding around shared warming experiences that recreates ancient community formation patterns. The selection for intelligence over pure physical strength that characterized Ice Age fire mastery established human evolutionary trajectory toward tool-dependent survival strategies, understanding that cognitive abilities became more important for survival than individual physical capabilities, learning that community cooperation and knowledge sharing provided better survival prospects than individual competition, recognizing that human evolutionary success depended on cultural and technological development rather than biological adaptation. You can sense the profound legacy of Ice Age fire masters in every aspect of modern human behavior, our comfort with technology that extends natural human capabilities, our preference for cooperative problem-solving over individual struggle, our deep psychological need for community and shared purposes, our instinctive understanding that intelligence applied with persistence can solve problems that seem impossible through individual effort alone. Allow yourself to trace the golden thread of innovation that connects Ice Age fire mastery to the agricultural revolution and beyond, understanding how the sophisticated knowledge of combustion fuel management and heat control developed during humanity's darkest winters provided the technological foundation for civilization itself. The precise understanding of combustion nature developed through Ice Age fire maintenance became the basis for controlled burning and forest management techniques for creating the exact fire conditions needed to clear underbrush without destroying valuable trees, knowledge of how different materials burned that enabled selective landscape modification, understanding of fire behavior that allowed human communities to reshape entire ecosystems for agricultural purposes. Picture yourself witnessing the transformation of fire knowledge into ceramic technology, ancient understanding of heat control applied to clay working knowledge of fuel selection and temperature management that enabled pottery creation expertise in maintaining precise burning conditions that transformed ceramic production from accidental discovery into reliable technology that revolutionized food storage and cooking. The organizational skills developed around Ice Age fire maintenance provided templates for agricultural community management, understanding how to coordinate group labor for shared benefit knowledge of resource planning and allocation that enabled seasonal agricultural work expertise in managing community responsibilities that translated directly into the cooperation required for successful farming settlements. Imagine the profound technological continuity between Ice Age ember preservation and metallurgy techniques for maintaining high-temperature fires that became essential for metal smelting knowledge of fuel types and burning characteristics that enabled bronze and iron working understanding of heat management that transformed fire from survival tool into industrial technology. The social structures created around fire expertise became models for agricultural leadership and specialization communities that recognized and rewarded technical competence systems that balanced individual expertise with collective benefit organizational patterns that enabled technological innovation while maintaining cultural continuity leadership models based on knowledge and demonstrated ability, rather than inheritance or force. Feel yourself understanding how Ice Age fire knowledge enabled human expansion into new territories, portable fire techniques that allowed exploration of regions beyond natural fuel abundance, understanding of fire behavior that enabled survival in diverse climates and ecosystems, expertise in fuel evaluation and preparation that supported long-distance travel and permanent settlement in challenging environments. The problem-solving methodologies developed through fire mastery established approaches to technological innovation that continue today. Systematic observation and experimentation, careful testing of new techniques before adopting them for crucial applications, integration of individual innovation with community knowledge, preservation approaches to risk management that balanced innovation with survival security. You can sense the profound intellectual foundation that Ice Age fire mastery provided for all subsequent human technological development, confidence that natural phenomena could be understood and controlled through patient observation and experimentation, belief that human intelligence could solve problems that initially seemed impossible, cultural values that supported innovation while preserving essential knowledge, social structures that enabled technological advancement while maintaining community welfare. Step into the recognition that every human culture carries the genetic memory of Ice Age fire ceremonies embedded in their most sacred rituals, understanding how the reverence for flame that meant life or death 25,000 years ago continues to shape spiritual practices and cultural celebrations across every human society on Earth. The eternal flames maintained in temples worldwide aren't random religious symbols, but cultural memories of when fire literally represented the boundary between human civilization and extinction. Understanding how Olympic torches recreate ancient flame preservation ceremonies, learning how ceremonial candles continue traditions that began around Ice Age hearths, recognizing how hearth-centered celebrations reflect psychological patterns established when fire was humanity's most crucial technology. Picture yourself observing the continuity between ancient fire rituals and modern spiritual practices. Wedding ceremonies that include candle lighting as symbols of new household establishment, religious services that use flame as representations of divine presence, cultural celebrations that center around bonfires and fireworks as expressions of community joy and renewal. Understanding how these practices continue ancient patterns of flame-centered community building. The psychological comfort that modern humans derive from firelight reflects evolutionary adaptations that developed over countless generations of fire-dependent neurological responses that create relaxation and social bonding around flame observation, mental associations that connect fire with safety, and community emotional patterns that find deep satisfaction in fire maintenance even when practical heating needs are met by other technologies. Imagine the profound spiritual dimensions that developed around Ice Age firekeeping, understanding how maintaining flame against impossible odds created the first human experiences of triumph over cosmic indifference. Learning how fire preservation became humanity's first successful campaign against entropy and chaos. Recognizing how fire mastery established the fundamental human belief that consciousness can impose meaning and order on an apparently meaningless universe. The mythological traditions surrounding fire across all human cultures reflect shared memories of when fire knowledge meant survival creation myths that describe fire as divine gift, heroic legends about fire thieves and firekeepers, spiritual traditions that use flame as symbol of enlightenment and transcendence, understanding how these seemingly disparate cultural elements derive from common human experiences around Ice Age hearths. Feel yourself recognizing the cultural universality of fire symbolism, understanding how every human language includes metaphorical associations between fire and concepts like passion, inspiration, transformation, and purification. Learning how fire imagery appears in art and literature across all human societies, recognizing how fire-related concepts form foundation for philosophical and spiritual thinking about human nature and cosmic purpose. The architectural patterns that center human living spaces around fireplaces and heating systems continue ancient spatial organization developed around Ice Age hearths. Homes designed with central heating. As focal points, social spaces arranged to facilitate gathering around warmth sources, community buildings that include ceremonial fire facilities, understanding how modern architecture unconsciously recreates ancient patterns of fire-centered social organization. You can sense the profound continuity between Ice Age firekeepers and contemporary human spirituals seeking the same psychological needs for meaning, community, and transcendence that were first met around ancient flames, the same human desire to create sacred spaces and ceremonies that celebrate triumph over adversity. The same fundamental human conviction that intelligence and cooperation can create light in darkness and warmth in cold. Allow yourself to contemplate the profound philosophical breakthrough that Ice Age firekeeping represents in the cosmic timeline, humanity's first successful demonstration that consciousness could impose order on chaotic natural forces, establishing the intellectual foundation for every subsequent technological achievement, and the fundamental human belief that problems can be solved through intelligence and persistence. The patient observation required for fire mastery established humanity's first scientific methodology systematic study of natural phenomena, careful experimentation with different techniques and materials, preservation through oral tradition that maintained successful innovations while eliminating failed approaches to knowledge acquisition that balanced individual insight with community wisdom and practical application. Picture yourself understanding how firekeeping created the template for all human technological development confidence that natural forces could be understood and controlled. Belief that careful observation and experimentation could reveal hidden principles governing physical phenomena, conviction that human intelligence could discover solutions to problems that initially seemed impossible, cultural values that supported innovation while maintaining practical focus on survival and community welfare. The collaborative problem-solving required for maintaining fire through Ice Age storms established patterns of human cooperation that enabled agriculture, architecture, and scientific inquiry, understanding how individual expertise contributed to community welfare, learning how shared challenges created bonds that transcended family relationships, recognizing how collective intelligence could solve problems beyond individual capability. Imagine the profound psychological transformation that occurred when humans successfully maintained fire against seemingly impossible odds. The shift from passive acceptance of environmental conditions to active resistance and modification development of confidence that human agency could influence natural events, establishment of the fundamental human conviction that consciousness matters in the cosmic order. The philosophical implications of fire mastery extend far beyond survival technology. Understanding how control over combustion represented humanity's first successful campaign against entropy. Learning how fire preservation demonstrated that intelligence could create and maintain order in chaotic systems, recognizing how firekeeping established the conceptual foundation for all subsequent human attempts to understand and control natural phenomena. Feel yourself recognizing the profound metaphysical statement that every maintained fire represented proof that consciousness could triumph over cosmic indifference, demonstration that intelligence applied with determination could create pockets of order and meaning in an apparently random universe, evidence that human values and purposes could influence physical reality through careful application of understanding and effort. The technological confidence that developed through fire mastery enabled every subsequent human achievement, understanding that problems could be solved through systematic approaches, belief that natural limitations could be overcome through intelligent application of resources and techniques, conviction that human cooperation could accomplish goals that seemed impossible for individuals. You can sense the direct connection between Ice Age firekeepers and modern scientific thinking. The same commitment to careful observation and experimentation, the same willingness to test theories against practical results, the same integration of individual insight with community knowledge, the same fundamental belief that natural phenomena operate according to principles that human intelligence can discover and apply. Feel yourself discovering the profound scientific validation of ancient wisdom, as modern neuroscience reveals that human brains are literally wired for fire fascination, with specific neural pathways activated by flame observation that promote relaxation, social bonding, and the psychological states that our ancestors needed for successful fire maintenance and community survival. The hypnotic effect of watching flames isn't learned behavior, but evolutionary adaptation brain structures that automatically focus attention on fire movement neural systems that create calming responses to flame observation, cognitive patterns that find flame watching inherently rewarding, and meditative understanding how these responses developed through countless generations of survival dependence on fire monitoring and maintenance. Picture yourself understanding the neurochemical processes that occur during fire observation, release of neurotransmitters that promote relaxation and reduce stress responses, activation of brain regions associated with meditation and focused attention and suppression of neural activity related to anxiety and hypervigilance chemical processes that explain why firelight creates psychological comfort even when practical heating needs are met through other technologies. The social bonding effects of shared fire experiences reflect neural adaptations that develop through Ice Age community, fire maintenance brain chemistry that promotes cooperation and empathy during flame-centered activities, neurological responses that create feelings of community and shared purpose around fire, experiences, psychological mechanisms that use fire observation as catalyst for social connection and group cohesion. Imagine the profound evolutionary psychology revealed through modern brain imaging, understanding how fire watching activates the same neural pathways associated with meditation and spiritual experiences, learning how flame observation triggers brain states that enhance creativity and problem-solving abilities, recognizing how fire fascination reflects genetic programming that once meant survival and continues to influence modern human psychology. The specific neural adaptations for fire-related pattern recognition demonstrate how deeply fire knowledge is embedded in human consciousness brain structures that automatically detect changes in flame behavior cognitive systems that recognize fire-related dangers and opportunities without conscious analysis, perceptual mechanisms that find fire-related visual patterns inherently meaningful and emotionally significant. Feel yourself recognizing the genetic basis of human comfort with controlled fire neurological predispositions that distinguish between threatening and beneficial fire experiences, brain chemistry that creates positive responses to appropriate fire use while maintaining healthy respect for dangerous fire situations, psychological mechanisms that enable confident fire management while preserving necessary caution. The modern therapeutic applications of fire observation validate ancient understanding of flame's psychological benefits. Medical research demonstrating how fireplace observation reduces blood pressure and stress hormones. Psychological studies showing how fire experiences promote mental health and emotional regulation. Therapeutic programs that use controlled fire activities to treat anxiety and depression. You can sense the profound validation that modern neuroscience provides for ancient fire wisdom. Scientific confirmation that fire fascination serves genuine psychological and social functions. Understanding how evolutionary adaptations continue to influence contemporary human behavior and preferences. Recognition that ancient fire knowledge encoded sophisticated understanding of human psychology that modern science is only beginning to appreciate fully. Allow yourself to contemplate the ultimate meaning of what you've witnessed. Understanding that in the vast timeline of cosmic evolution, the moment when humans learned to maintain fire through ice age conditions represents a pivotal transition, the emergence of consciousness capable of actively resisting entropy and chaos. The birth of intelligence that could impose meaning and order on an indifferent universe. Firekeeping wasn't merely survival strategy, but humanity's first experiment in applied consciousness. The demonstration that awareness combined with will could triumph over circumstance, proof that intelligence could create and maintain order in chaotic systems, evidence that consciousness represented a new force in cosmic evolution, capable of influencing physical reality through understanding and determination. Picture yourself recognizing the profound cosmic significance of those ancient humans, feeding flames in storms beyond imagining. They were conducting the first experiments in the application of intelligence to physical challenges, proving that consciousness could make a difference in the material world, establishing the fundamental human conviction that awareness and effort could triumph over apparently impossible odds. The philosophical implications extend far beyond human survival. Understanding how fire mastery represents consciousness discovering its own power to influence reality, learning how ancient firekeepers established the conceptual foundation for all subsequent human technological and spiritual development, recognizing how Ice Age flame maintenance was humanity's first successful argument with cosmic indifference. Imagine the profound continuity between ancient firekeepers and every subsequent human achievement. The same fundamental approach of applying intelligence and persistence to solve problems. The same conviction that consciousness can impose order on chaos. The same willingness to work cooperatively toward goals that seem impossible for individuals. The same basic faith that effort and understanding can transform hostile reality into livable space. The technological trajectory from Ice Age fires to modern civilization demonstrates the cumulative power of consciousness applied across generations. Each innovation building on previous discoveries, each generation adding their own chapter to humanity's ongoing campaign against entropy and limitation. Each advance representing another victory for intelligence over circumstance. Feel yourself understanding the spiritual dimensions of this cosmic perspective, how firekeeping established humanity's first successful relationship with transcendent purpose, learning how ancient flame maintenance created the psychological foundation for all subsequent human spiritual seeking, recognizing how Ice Age fire mastery was humanity's first demonstration that consciousness could create meaning in an apparently meaningless universe. The modern continuation of this ancient project takes forms that would seem magical to Ice Age firekeepers, electric lights that banish darkness across entire continents, fusion reactors that recreate stellar processes to power human civilization space technologies that carry human consciousness beyond Earth itself, understanding how every contemporary achievement continues the same fundamental human project of using intelligence to create islands of order and meaning in cosmic chaos. You can sense the profound responsibility and privilege of carrying forward this ancient legacy, understanding that every act of intelligent problem solving continues the work begun around Ice Age hearths, learning that every application of consciousness to overcome limitation honors those ancient firekeepers who proved that human intelligence could make a difference in the cosmic order, recognizing that contemporary humans are the latest chapter in humanity's longest-running story of consciousness triumphing over chaos. As you allow this understanding to settle into your deepest awareness, feel yourself connected to the unbroken chain of human determination that stretches from Ice Age caves to the present moment and extends into futures that will carry the flame of consciousness to destinations that ancient firekeepers could never have imagined but would certainly recognize as continuation of their own essential work. Using intelligence, cooperation, and persistence to create light in darkness and warmth in cold, to transform hostile reality into spaces where consciousness can flourish and meaning can take root in the infinite cosmos. The Ice Age firekeepers didn't just survive winter, they ignited the eternal flame of human civilization that burns as brightly today as it did in those ancient caves and will continue burning as long as consciousness chooses to resist entropy, as long as intelligence commits to creating order from chaos, as long as humans remember that every light we kindle continues the same fundamental project of proving that awareness matters in the vast and different universe.